12 RPGs, 6 indies, and 6 AAA developed RPGs. All hype. If you're new here, I'm Super Derek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for gamers who love RPGs, and today we're going to be talking about the games that I am currently most hyped for, including SACRIFIRE. It's an indie RPG that is sort of a 2D style RPG on a 3D plane based on what I'm seeing from the trailer. It's kind of in the same vein as like the Grandia style games from the PlayStation 1 era. This one has definitely caught my attention. Flashy battles. It looks like it could be super interesting, but I don't really know a whole lot else about it aside from what they show in the trailer. But that trailer has definitely got me excited enough to be at the bottom of this top list of RPGs I'm hyped for, followed by Dragon Quest III, the HD 2D. As far as AAA developed game, it has piqued my interest because Square Enix is showing that they're continuing to be interested and continuing that HD 2D design that they come up with Octopath Traveler, and seeing that applied to older games in their backlog is also really reassuring that, you know, maybe we'll see some other games that I'm maybe a little bit more excited for get the similar treatment. Like if you take a look at Final Fantasy VI, for instance, that would be a prime candidate, I think, for this exact style treatment. But you know what? If they want to test it out first with some other games like Dragon Quest III, which again, I love the game, I played it, but I think that there's better ones out there for them to do this with, well, that's okay. We'll see where they go. I hope that they do a lot with it. But the next one is another indie RPG that I'm really excited for called Wander Stars. Wander Stars is right up my alley as a fan of the early 90s anime. You know, I grew up on Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and this looks like it was heavily inspired by that style of of anime, but it is an RPG in which you attack people by shouting out different nouns. So like you might say like ultra water punch, and it's going to be, you know, they do a sort of water elemental type punch to the enemy. So it's all based on like, you know, that trope of shouting out your attacks during anime. And that's really got me pretty excited by in and of itself. Plus the art style looks like they nailed that 90s anime aesthetic, which is just, you know, it goes straight to my heartstrings, right? Followed by Dragon Quest 12, and still we're at the kind of the bottom of this top list of games that I'm excited for, and Dragon Quest 12 is only at the bottom here so far because I haven't really seen enough about it to really get me super hyped about it. Dragon Quest 12 has the teaser that they released where they show off like the fires and stuff, but I mean that's about it. So, but I've never played a Dragon Quest game that I didn't enjoy, so I am cautiously optimistically hyped to see what they do with the next one. Shrine's Legacy. This is that indie RPG that I talked about not too long ago during an episode of the Experience Points, where I played through the demo and they did a big Kickstarter campaign and they've reached their goal, and now it's looking like this is probably, I don't know if it's going to come to consoles yet, but it's definitely in development to go the full distance here. This RPG was inspired by Illusion of Gaia and Soul Blazer, and that like the way that you attack and defeat enemies in an area unlocks paths forward, and it plays really well based on what I played of the demo, and I'm really excited to see where they take it from here. GRANBLUE Fantasy RELINK. This is a game that I talked about back in 2018 in my last games that I'm hyped for video, and I'm still hyped for it. Man, I was still saying back then, I was like, I'm hyped for this game to come out in 2018. Oh, sweet summer child me. Yeah, well, it didn't come out in 2018, but it looks like it's going to come out in 2022, and I'm still hyped for it. I gotta say, though, that my hype has been tempered somewhat in regards to GRANBLUE Fantasy RELINK, because, I mean, back then, the graphics looked phenomenal. They looked like a PlayStation 5 RPG before the PlayStation 5 was announced, right? And now, it looks like a PlayStation 5 RPG after the PS5 has been out for a while. So, yeah, okay, it still looks really great, but, you know, timing is everything, and unfortunately, it's tempered my expectations somewhat. If it had come out in 2018, well, of course it would have been beautiful. It still is. But Yeah, hype has been tempered. Game still looks phenomenal. The battle system looks incredible. I think it's going to be really great when it does come out. So now we're about the middle of this hype list, this hype train, if you will. And QUARTET is a game by Something Classic. And they're the people who made the Shadows of Adam RPG that I reviewed not too long ago, if you want to go take a look at that. And that game made me fall in love with Something Classic and pretty much everything that they've touched subsequently. QUARTET looks like a really great game where you have 4 people in the front row and 4 people in the back row, and you can switch them all out as you want. And that's pretty dang awesome. I love that mechanic from like the Breath of Fire series, so to see it kind of be used in a modern RPG, a modern indie RPG, has definitely got my attention. Plus, again, it's Something Classic. Their blend of humor and quality and incredible pixel art it's hard to beat. And then that brings us to Triangle Strategy, and this is that 2D HD RPG, HD 2D by Square Enix. That is a tactical RPG, and it looks like that's also going to be really great because it's got 3 different main factions, thus the triangle of the Triangle Strategy. Each faction is a point on that triangle. I hope that triangle strategy idea becomes sort of infused throughout the entirety of the game. Like, I'm hoping that it's not just like good versus evil, but, you know, some nuanced positions for each of the empires or involved parties to be taking, right? If each one can be sympathetic, then this triangle of strategy could be a really great setup for some really good drama. And, well, you know how I feel about sympathetic antagonists and how much I think drama improves the way that a lot of things work in JRPGs. Triangle Strategy, I think it looks probably the best of Square Enix's HD 2D projects so far, and I'm pretty excited to see where that goes from here. And now that brings us back to an indie RPG called Sea of Stars, and this thing looks incredible, like a Chrono Trigger game being made today by an indie developer. It looks fantastic, and not only that, but it has Yasunori Mitsuda on board as a guest composer. And the fact that Yasunori Mitsuda is involved, one of the original developers or composers behind Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, his involvement in here kind of give it his own seal of quality. You know, it seems like he only really joins the projects that he's really excited about, and he's talked about how excited he is by this one. I'm feeling like maybe this is a good thing to be hyped over. Sea of Stars looks so good in the teaser that they've released, and I cannot wait to see where it goes from here. And I really want to see the game that they developed prior called The Messenger. I hadn't heard of it until I've seen these trailers, and I really should look into that at some point, as maybe that's something for me to check out. Maybe. Then that brings us to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 hasn't been announced yet, but it was definitely teased in the PS5 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, it ended with them kind of walking along a road, trying to do some hitchhiking, and it didn't show off a whole lot of like what is going to be on the way, but it does show that maybe they'll be deviating from the initial path set forth by Final Fantasy VII, maybe a little bit more. And that's pretty exciting because I feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake was probably at its worst when it was trying to stick too closely to the original story of 7. I know that there are going to be people who would disagree with me on that, who just want the very purest remake experience of Final Fantasy VII, but you guys have the original Final Fantasy VII. I'm kind of curious to see what else they can do with this, you know? Like I said in my review of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it seems like it's a similar story, just told by a different storyteller, maybe one who remembers things a little bit differently, and that's okay in my book. So, before we get to the top 2 RPGs that I'm currently hyped for, there are 2 sort of runners-up who are still kind of in the rumor mill that I couldn't really, you know, I didn't want to include them in here because hype responsibly, children, because these games have not been announced. They might never be announced. They've been in rumors for a long time. Hopefully they go somewhere. Hype responsibly, okay? But those runners-up are the Chrono Cross and Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered that they've been talking about. I don't know if they're actually in the works or if maybe they were using the Chrono Cross from like the render from that mobile game. That trailer looked very hype, by the way, but then I saw the gameplay trailer and the bottom fell out. So yeah, I'm not super hyped about the mobile game. There's possible reasons for these to have been included in some sort of leak, without necessarily meaning that, yes, they're committed to coming out with these games at some point. So hype responsibly, you know, be cautiously optimistic, but don't let yourself get hurt if you don't hear from them. Trust me, as someone who's been looking forward to Chrono Break for decades at this point. And then Persona 3 Definitive Edition and Persona 4 Golden getting ported over to other platforms. Those are sort of also kind of unannounced, and they go hand in hand with the rumor mill thing I was talking about. You know, I did predict or I did tell Atlas the things that I wanted them to do with their 25th anniversary, you know, and one of those was the big box of LPs that for the box set of the Persona series. They did it. It was $400 and I couldn't pre-order one in time, and I saved $400 by doing so, and they won't be fulfilled for 2 years anyway, so oh well, I guess. Be careful what you wish for. But hey, if Atlas would listen, if they were listening to me, if they were doing what I told them to do, then these two things, the Persona 4 Golden ports to other platforms and Persona 3 Definitive Edition, might be on the way. So fingers crossed, hype responsibly. That brings us to the two RPGs that I am currently most hyped for. There's the indie RPG, which you might already remember, EIYUDEN Chronicle. EIYUDEN Chronicle, for those of you who don't know, is made by the people, the original minds behind the original Suikoden 1, 2, and 3. The fact that they're making this HD 2D RPG of EIYUDEN Chronicle that looks like Suikoden mixed with Octopath, oh man, it looks so freaking exciting. Not to be confused with EIYUDEN Chronicle Rise, which is the mobile game that I could take it or leave it. It's not for me, but maybe it's for you. But EIYUDEN Chronicle 100 Heroes, that is 100% hype, and I feel like it's also probably the best looking HD 2D RPG that has been on this list so far. And then that leaves us with Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16, that they released that trailer about 6 months ago. I've calmed down a little bit because it looked incredible at the time. I've calmed down a little bit, and I still think that this is going to be an incredible experience. It's directed by the guy who turned around Final Fantasy 14. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I know that you constantly tell me how great he is and how he turned around Final Fantasy 14, and now it's one of the best RPG experiences of all time, as I've had it explained to me before. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'd really love to see what this guy can do when given the reins to a full-on single-player experience, because a lot of you might already remember that I just don't really care much for MMOs. I want to make sure that I have as much time as possible to play my single-player RPGs, and I'm afraid of falling down the rabbit hole of a MMO and never being seen again. So, anyways, Final Fantasy 16. It's the first. Is this the very first ever mature rated Final Fantasy RPG? I don't even know that off the top of my head. It's been so long, but the fact of the matter is, it looks like it's gonna be great. You know, children getting splattered with blood, summoning friggin' Bahamut? Was that who it was? I don't know. They didn't give it a name in the video, but you know, fighting against some sort of like Phoenix. Oh god, yeah, I think it's got a lot of potential. But if there were some RPGs that you're hyped for that I didn't talk about, let me know about them down in the comments below. But if you are new here, and if I told you about some RPGs that you didn't know about and are now hyped for them, let me know about that down below as well. And again, if you're new here, please be sure to get subscribed, because I am Super Derek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for gamers who love RPGs, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everyone.